on December 15th, 1944, as snow hammered the forests of Belgium and the thunder of artillery rolled across the frozen Ardennes, one young American sergeant quietly hammered nails into an old ammunition crate, while his own men laughed at him. To them it looked ridiculous. A rusted ammo box stuffed with mud, rocks, and spare wires, a contraption so crude that even the greenest private could see it, wasn't going to fool anyone. But to Sergeant Daniel O'Keefe of the U.S. 106th Infantry Division, that simple box would become the key to survival and the weapon that would destroy an entire German convoy. This is the story of a soldier who refused to accept defeat, a soldier who outsmarted an army that believed itself unstoppable, and a soldier whose fake ammo box would spark one of the most unbelievable battlefield victories of the Ardennes. The story begins miles from the front lines, in an Irish-American neighborhood of Chicago. Before the war, Daniel O'Keefe wasn't a demolitions expert. He wasn't a career soldier. He wasn't anything the army would look at twice. He worked as a scrapyard mechanic, pulling apart washing machines and battered Model A Fords. His hands were always dirty, his boots always stained with grease. And yet, his boss would say one thing about him. "Give Danny a pile of junk, and he'll give you a working engine." He taught himself circuits from radio manuals. He fixed his neighbors' stereos for spare cash. And he had a strange obsession: booby traps. He studied traps used by poachers, hunters, and even Chicago gangs, not because he needed to, but because he loved puzzles. Every trap was a challenge. When the war came, his mechanical intuition didn't go unnoticed for long. The army snatched him up and made him a combat engineer, specializing in obstacles, mines, and explosives. And so this scrapyard mechanic found himself shipped to Europe, just in time for the greatest German offensive since the invasion of France. The 106th Infantry Division had barely arrived when the German army slammed into them like a freight train. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. O'Keefe's unit, the 591st Field Artillery Battalion, was thrown into the Schnee-Eifel, one of the most vulnerable positions along the American line. The Germans attacked with tanks, artillery, and elite Volksgrenadier units. The snowstorm made air support impossible. Radio lines went down, ammunition began running low, and O'Keefe was handed his first impossible task: hold the crossroads near Schönberg. At any cost, if the Americans lost it, German armor could punch deep into Belgium, straight toward supply hubs the Allies depended on. For 3 days, O'Keefe's men fought back endless waves of German troops. Shells fell, trees exploded, men froze to death in foxholes. Trucks carrying precious ammunition were shredded by artillery before they could reach the guns. O'Keefe saw it happening with his own eyes. Every hour, fewer shells, fewer rifles, fewer men. On the morning of December 15th, O'Keefe returned from a supply run to find a pile of empty ammo crates tossed aside near a burned truck. And that scrapyard mind began working. He grabbed one, tested the latches, and flipped it open. Inside, nothing but splinters. He ran his hand along the metal edges. What if a German believed there were shells inside? What if he could make the enemy come to them, instead of the Americans trying to haul supplies through artillery fire? His sergeant major scoffed. "O'Keefe, that's the dumbest damn thing I've ever seen. The Krauts aren't going to stop for a box of rocks." But O'Keefe ignored him. He ripped out wiring from a wrecked radio and scavenged blasting caps still intact from damaged crates. He filled the box with stones to match the weight of real ammunition. Then he ran a tripwire underneath the snow. He stood back and admired his creation. A booby-trapped ammo box. A baited mine. The men laughed. The officers ignored him. But O'Keefe planted it anyway, right by the road leading to the crossroads. "If the Germans need ammo as bad as we do, they'll take anything they can get." Hours passed. Nothing. Night fell. Snow buried the box. Then, truck engines. A German patrol crept forward. They spotted the crate. A soldier barked, "Munition! Amerikanische Artillerieschüsse!" They rushed to load it, and the explosion sent flaming debris and steel splinters through the squad. It worked. O'Keefe grinned, while everyone else stared in disbelief. Nobody laughed anymore. With the road temporarily clear, O'Keefe returned to camp to find his commanding officer standing there, arms crossed. "Sergeant, do it again." This time, O'Keefe wasn't scavenging from a single wreck. He had access to damaged jeeps, dead radios, spare grenades, and his imagination ran wild. He built 6 fake ammo crates, then 12. Some looked pristine, others were battered. Some he rigged to explode when lifted, others triggered when opened. He placed them anywhere German patrols might retreat: roads, culverts, crossroads, tree lines. Each one was a promise: steal this, and you die. And as German artillery tore apart American supply lines, desperate soldiers, on both sides, became scavengers. By December 18th, 3 full days into the German offensive, O'Keefe's traps had destroyed half-tracks, armored cars, and infantry squads. One crate detonated with such force it knocked a panzer crew unconscious and blew the treads off their tank. Radio calls from nearby American units repeated the same phrase: O'Keefe mines. The legend grew, but O'Keefe didn't build traps to win glory. He built them because if the Germans broke through, nobody in the 106th was getting out alive. Everything came down to one moment. On December 19th, a German reconnaissance unit spotted a weakness in the American line, a narrow forest road leading north. That road was the hinge point. If they controlled it, they could flank the 106th and wipe it out. O'Keefe and a scattered group of engineers were ordered to hold that position. They had no tanks, no heavy guns, and barely a dozen functioning rifles. But O'Keefe looked around. Wrecked U.S. ammo trucks. Shell crates scattered everywhere. Black smoke rising. He turned to his men. "Pile up the boxes. Make it look like a supply dump." They stacked dozens, real, empty, and fake, in a tight cluster right beside a blind corner in the forest. Then O'Keefe set the trap. He connected nearly every fake box to one central detonator, buried beneath a fresh layer of snow. He expected a patrol, maybe 2 trucks. He did not expect an entire convoy. Dust and snow swirled ahead of them as German trucks, filled with infantry, rolled forward. Behind them came armored scout cars, and behind those, a column of Panzerhaifos. The enemy believed they had found captured supplies, exactly what they needed to strike deeper into Allied lines. German soldiers leapt from the trucks and sprinted toward the crates, shouting with joy. They grabbed at wooden handles. They yanked at metal clasps. They fought each other for ammunition they desperately needed. O'Keefe waited. He let them gather. He watched the trucks bunch together. He clenched the detonator in his frozen hand. Then he whispered to himself, "Scrapyard special. Don't let me down." He squeezed. The forest erupted. The explosion was like a thunderclap. A column of fire shot into the snowfall. Trucks disintegrated. German soldiers vanished into the blast. The lead panzer was flipped, off the road and slammed into a tree. When the smoke thinned, O'Keefe's men stood speechless. He had just destroyed a German assault column with a pile of junk. The Germans fell back, but the American position was still doomed. More enemy troops were coming. They had no resupply, no reinforcements, and O'Keefe had spent all his tricks. One officer placed a hand on his shoulder. "You bought us time. That's all anyone could have done." Shortly afterward, the 106th, surrounded, freezing, and out of ammunition, was forced to surrender. It was one of the largest U.S. surrenders of the war. O'Keefe became a prisoner of war. He was marched into Germany. He was abused, starved. He survived by telling stories of Chicago and the scrapyard, stories of booby traps that drove the guards mad with fear. He never received a medal at that time. He never stood in a grand ceremony. His name never made the front page. because the official records only reported the surrender, not the miracle that prevented the German breakthrough from being much worse. After the war, O'Keefe returned to Chicago. He fixed cars again. He married, raised children, told stories, but not the whole truth. When people asked if he was a hero, he shook his head. "I was just a mechanic. I did what mechanics do. I made things work." It wasn't until the 1980s, when classified reports were declassified and veterans began speaking openly, that his commanding officer, now retired, filed a recommendation for recognition. In that dusty document he wrote, "Without Sergeant O'Keefe's devices, German armor would have advanced miles deeper before sunrise. His actions changed the course of the engagement." Historians later agreed that the delay caused by O'Keefe's trap allowed U.S. reinforcements to secure key roads further west, preventing an even more disastrous encirclement. Still, medals weren't important to O'Keefe. He cared most about the men he saved, and the convoy he stopped. Daniel O'Keefe passed away quietly in 1991. His family found his old army uniform, neatly folded. In the pocket was a tiny, rusted latch, once part of an ammunition crate. That piece of metal became his medal, his trophy, his reminder. Thanks for watching.